How you as an educator have you helped students to regain that trust in themselves as their number one teacher, and then you being the facilitator to help that,
Well, that's such a great
nurture?
question. The first thing I tell people is that it's not your fault. It is not your fault that you hurt. This is, and I go systemic. This is a system-wide problem. It's a problem with our educational system that we've inherited this model from 150 years ago, which was designed for a certain thing, to build up the orchestras in Europe. Paris Conservatory spread out to all around Europe and this country and the Far East. And it's not your teacher's fault either, because they were taught this way, and we even, when we have teachers who are abusive or super critical, most of those people had that happen to them. So it's this it's similar to intergenerational trauma that we have. It's been passed down, this what I call toxic self-judgment. We get that from the very beginning. So what do you do if you're 10 years old and you come in and you start taking trumpet lessons and your teacher tells you all the things that you're doing wrong?
Those are the things you focus on.
What does that tell you about yourself?
That there's really just you're focusing on the negative. You're not seeing the positive.
So you think there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't start when you're in college. It starts in the very first lesson, I think. And I can see now that happened to me as well. And it's almost every musician that I've worked with who has been injured has an element of that state. I'm going to call it a state because it's a state of being. When you believe there's something wrong with me, I can never be good enough. I'm never going to get it the way I want, no matter what I do. My teacher is always going to be correcting me. It's a culture of correction and criticism. And I know I'm being a little intense about this, but it's because I see so many. I've worked with over 1,000 injured musicians in the past 25 years, directly, and of course, indirectly through a lot more people, but that's a lot of pain. And I see it directly related to how we think about ourselves and how we've been taught unintentionally to think about ourselves. It's not something that people are doing on purpose. I'm going to make my student be really self-critical. No, it's part of the system. And so then we get there, and then our teachers kind of reinforce that instead of and a lot of musicians will say this: my goal as a teacher is to make myself obsolete. And like parents, that's your goal as a parent, to make yourself obsolete. So you give somebody the tools they need to go forward. But we don't always stop to think about what those tools are, what they really need, the kind of thoughtfulness and and most specifically, body awareness. We can teach them how to do phrasing, and we can teach them history and theory and, all this intellectual stuff that they need to know. But we really need to teach them how to use their body. So when they get to a difficult gig, or they're at a gig and the person next to them sort of sneers at them and looks funny at them because they made a mistake or whatever, how do they deal with that? I worked with somebody in their 80s who was traumatized. They had had other trauma earlier in their life, but they played in an orchestra next to a musician who was constantly criticizing them. And they got to the point where they couldn't play anymore. They were so traumatized by this person, always dumping on them. So this is stuff we really need to help our students have these tools. I spent a lot of time teaching tools of, I'm not going to call it relaxation, but really what it's about is being present. Because if you become fully present in all your senses, you're going to lose those nasty little negative thoughts because there's no room for them.
It really isn't. That's been something that I've also tried to focus on in the last year and a half. And I think for everybody out there who's going through injury recovery, that is probably one of the greatest things you can work on off the horn in my case, or off the flute in yours, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good answer to your.
Yeah, exactly. Because once you are able to, whenever that happens, to begin playing again, you'll be bringing a whole new perspective to your instrument, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it'll just totally enrich your experience.
And
I just,
isn't that
yeah,
what
I
we
love it.
want in performance? We want to be fully present. We don't want to be worrying about what the audience is thinking or what we had for dinner or any of that stuff. We want to be fully there, present, so we can communicate with the audience and say what we want to say. And that takes all of your senses, noticing the space around you, noticing what you feel, what the air feels like, what connecting with actually eye contact with the audience and communicating with them. A lot of people don't do that. They're like put a wall up.
The next thing I wanted to talk about was along that line of that culture shift that needs to happen
Mhm.
with the education system, because I've just observed in my peers at my school and in myself, definitely in myself, that kind of, it's interesting you use the conservatory mindset, because that's the kind of how I perceive it, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
It's a
and
model. It's actually been
it's a model.
identified in research, the conservatory model. Yeah.
Oh, I'd be interested to check that out. And what would be needed, like, I guess, concrete things, as well as cultural things that would need to be able to shift that to a more present-minded, healthy mindset, around playing.
That's great. We have to recognize that we're in a really difficult time. That if you, think about what youth are going through. Everybody who's in college now has been in school shooting situations since they were in kindergarten. So a colleague of mine said this to me, and I was like, oh my God. School has never been a safe place. What are we doing to kids when they spend all day, every day in a place that is not safe, where they have to worry about barricading themselves? This is trauma with a capital T. This isn't just little t trauma. This is big trauma. And many have actually, been through actual shooting. So we've got that. We've got climate mess going on where kids are thinking, look, geez, the earth might not even be here for me. Why should I bother? Because there's nothing, it's all going to be destroyed. We've got economic insecurity. We've got political divisions, massive amounts of hate, people going back and forth. We've got kids, especially in the music business, in the music world, we have a lot of kids from the GLBTQ population who are sensitive to this stuff going on. They deal with discrimination, with hate. Maybe in the music classroom they're safe, but there are a lot of places where they're not safe. We've got folks of color, brown and black folks, and especially, oh my God, it's the worst. The high suicide rates are for trans kids of color. It's up to, like, last figure I saw was like 60% of suicide ideation. We are messed up. And these kids have a ton of anxiety. So, I'm talking about studio teaching here because it's a little different from classroom. In classroom, you've got more group support. But if you expect kids to come into your studio and drop their entire life at the door and just play with abandon, it's just not going to happen. I talk to university teachers, and like, kids are so anxious, and they come in and they cry and they can't focus, and it's a mess. So the first thing there's three things we have to do, actually. The first thing is to acknowledge that we need to do better at student-centered teaching. Now, this is an old concept that started coming up around turn of the 20th century. Around early 1900, Alexander, Jacques Delcros, Maria Montessori, all these great educators, Karl Orff, Kodai, they had this what was revolutionary at the time, this belief that you have to start where kids are and bring what you're teaching to them. So I learned about the first Dalcroze class I ever took. It blew my mind because they said, well, just walk at your own speed. And the teacher made music to go with the speed that the child was walking. their own speed. They didn't say, I'm going to play this march and you walk in time to my march. They said, you go ahead and walk and I'll make music for you.
Huh.
Think
That's
about
fascinating.
how different that is from trying to make the child adapt to something versus celebrating and reinforcing what they're doing. So the first thing is to learn more about student-centered teaching. And there's a ton of stuff out there. I've written a couple articles about it. The second is we need to celebrate what people are doing. If you look into positive psychology and all the negative thought, we already talked about negative thoughts, where 80% of our thoughts are negative and at least half of those are the same ones over and over again. When do we celebrate in private lessons? When are we going, oh my God, that was fantastic. What did you do? I want to hear that. Tell me what you were thinking about. I remember my teacher, my Alexander teacher, Barbara, when I did something right, she'd be like jumping up and down like a little kid, It was like, we have to shift that mindset so that we have joy and celebration instead of thinking about everything we do is wrong. And then two other things. So that all of that is pointing to putting music on a somatic basis, so that making music is done through movement. And that's what body mapping is all about. Every sound we make is created by movement. But the other big thing, and this is really general, and this is going into classroom work as well. We have to look at trauma-infused or trauma-sensitive instruction. And there's a lot of good research about there that what really matters, what helps kids who are in difficult situations build resilience. And there's a whole thing about adverse childhood experiences, and the newest research coming out about focal dystonia is all about how we have to do this and a bunch of other stuff, but it's basically the same stuff. One caring adult who sees a child once a week for a year or more can change that child's future and help build resilience. There's enough research out there that says it. So how do we do that? Look at who those people are. They're the music teachers. We have more time with kids than their own parents do sometimes. So when we build in collaboration and engagement and agency and self-determination and all these things that they have proven through the research of trauma-centered, trauma-infused teaching, the same things that we need to build the confidence of our kids. I think, personally, it's my personal opinion, that when we start kids off at age 10, telling them all the things they do wrong, we are building in traumatic experiences for them. Small t trauma. But that's part of our system.
Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode of Trust the Process, the official podcast of Musician Unchained, the newest coaching program dedicated to helping musicians navigate and overcome injury. But before you go, I have a few quick ways you can stay connected and support our growing community. First of all, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me a text with the link below and share your thoughts, questions, or just say hi. You can also check the show out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We also would love to see you in our Facebook support group, Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group. If you found value in today's episode, consider making a donation to support our mission of empowering musicians worldwide. Every contribution helps us create more content and resources for you. So visit link number 2 below to support the mission. If you decide to donate, I'll send you my newest resource, the Injured Musician Toolkit, which is an ebook designed to give you tools to help you get through your injury. Subscribe to our newsletter to get exclusive insights, tips, sneak previews of episodes, and announcements straight to your inbox. Act now and I will send you a free gift. So sign up at www.musicianunchained.com/newsletter. And if you or someone you know would like to go deeper with me in the topics of injury and mindset, head over back to musicianunchained.com and check out the Let's Hang tab. As always, I want to thank Daniel Baldwin, my audio engineer, and my sister Dana Lovell for her help with the promotional materials. There is no podcast without them. But before I go, I want to tell you how much I deeply appreciate your time and support. You are not alone on this journey. There are musicians and educators out there who need this resource, and we need to get it to them. Together, we are breaking the chain of old habits and thought patterns that don't serve us anymore, and unchaining the potential within ourselves to face each challenge with strength and resilience. So, as I always say, keep on keeping on and keep trusting the process. Until next time.